Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Hope you're all fit and well. I've already seen Jim Turner has arrived, saying morning peeps. Good morning, Jim. Konstantinos Maragos has just joined us over on Instagram, as has Gerard Zimmerman and Gunnar4. Well, some weird names over there. Yeah, plenty of other people over there. Another busy show for you today. Yesterday afternoon, I actually did my first ever live broadcast to the Substack platform, where I run my Demolition Insider website, newsletter, call it what you will. Very successful. Not a huge audience, I have to say. There were people watching, but not a huge audience. Not a great deal of interaction. But I have to say, it was done. I was doing it purely as a test, and the test worked. The system worked. Nothing fell off. Nothing fell over. And the resulting video, I think, is very worthwhile. Certainly got a lot of good feedback from it. The recording of that is over on our YouTube channel, and I also stripped out the audio and put that onto our buymeacoffee.com/demolition news website. So anybody that's in our WhatsApp group has already seen that. Latham's Plant has just joined us over on Instagram as well. Joel Martins has joined us as well. Another busy morning. But yeah, yesterday's afternoon's discussion was about fatalities in the industry and what we need to do about it. And I'm going to be revisiting that today in our morning monologue. Lots and lots to discuss on that. And tomorrow's morning monologue, I haven't written it yet, but I already know the subject matter of it. Those of you that are familiar with the movie Jaws, you remember there are a couple of shark attacks in the movie Jaws, and the chief of police, Martin Brody, wants to shut down the beaches, and the mayor, looking ahead to the 4th of July celebrations, decides it's best for the local population to keep the beaches open. And as a result, chaos ensues, more people are munched, and so on down the line. I feel like the chief of police right now. I warned. I fired a flare. I fired a warning shot to the demolition industry more than 4 years ago about an existential threat that was barreling down the road towards them. And my warnings were largely dismissed as scaremongering. That Mark Antony bloke just trying to drum up business for his website just come home to roost. Yeah. And now, to go back to my Jaws analogy, maybe we're going to need a bigger boat. Oddly quiet over on the chat. I can see lots of people in the chat, but none of the comments are coming through. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start the show in the hope that that actually shakes things a little bit loose. If you are on, let me think, if you're on Twitch, if you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, and you're not seeing your comments coming through, there's a problem with the system. As I say, I'm going to try and shake it loose. So let me get this show on the road. Yeah, hopefully the comments will start to come through in a moment. As I say, I can see plenty of people there, but they're not coming through, which means I'll probably get a splurge at some point. But anyway, we're going to crack on with the show in the hope that those that are watching, even if you are commenting, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just getting no comments at the moment. But it is Tuesday, the 13th of January. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Antony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming. And in today's show, replacing a 130-meter bridge ahead of schedule. We brought you the demolition portion. We're going to do the follow-up to that. We're on the front line with JCB in the battle against Britain's potholes. Komatsu delivering the wheel load of power. And we're going to be deploying a duck in demolition. Nice bit of alliteration there. Plus, in today's edition of Mark's Morning Monologue, the space between. That's what we've called it. It will make sense, I hope, when we get there. But before we get to all of that, let's have a bit of Caterpillar to get us underway, and hopefully some comments will start arriving in just a moment. Yes, I'm not speaking to myself anymore because Ken Hatcher has just arrived. He says, "Good morning, playthings." Lots of rain where he is, and he's not alone in that. Mark Whiting is in the house. Ken Hatcher says the cable's plugged in Wales, all working here. It now appears to be all working here as well. And just to prove that the rain is not just on Wales, although that is often the case, Jim Turner has just said, "I'll be quiet as I'm hand chopping sugar beet in the pissing rain and feeding sheep." Well, give my regards to the sheep, would you? Yeah, loads and loads of stuff to get through today. First of all, we're going to start. Let me take Jim out the way there. You will recall, I think it was probably this day last week. We brought you the details or a video of Armac taking down a bridge in Penrith. Well, it was part of an ongoing project to replace a bridge. They took it away, and the fine folks at Skanska have replaced it. This is the story of how that was done.
So credit goes to the team, in particular the engineering team, who've done a fantastic job. The criteria was to lift and transport the bridge into position to a tolerance of 30 mil. We've achieved that, and it's gone in within 5 mil, and as you can appreciate, it's a lot smaller, so credit to all involved.
Network Rail's engineering team have supported us all the way and helped us with our decisions. Same with National Highways, we've had some pretty key interfaces. We've had to work through both parties, which isn't usual. So yeah, it's been really good.
Take a great bit of pride in this. This has been a fantastic civil engineering project who have been involved with. This is years of planning, engineering and collaboration all coming into effect to see this bridge in its final position.
So I remember going to our industry partners 2.5 years ago to kind of present a 2-week closure of the West Coast Main Line. It was a huge thing for them. It's kind of an unprecedented block, this. But they were all understanding it's an essential piece of work, and they've all worked incredibly hard to provide the diversionary routes and alternative travel arrangements for everyone. So it's a massive thank you. It's a huge undertaking to shut the West Coast Main Line and divert all the traffic that goes on it. It's the busiest intermodal railway in Europe. So it is huge, and a massive thank you to all the people involved.
I'd like to thank the local residents for the patience more than anything. We do realise and understand the disruptions it's caused, and we try to minimise that disruption on the project. From a team's point of view, we've tried to communicate appropriately, linking up with both the highways and Network Rail, trying to minimise disruption across the scheme. Just again, thank you for your patience and apologies for any disruptions caused.
From Monday morning through to Thursday morning, there will be a lot of work going on that track level. All the rail system works need to be done. That's placing the ballast, the rail, the overhead lines, all the cabling systems to ensure that by Thursday morning we had a fully operational railway system. It's a significant bit of investment to improve the rail system across this part of the network, and certainly once the work is completed, that will lead to an improved service.
Yeah, quite some job. Well handled, I would say. We've had some more arrivals. I don't know whether they were here before and their comments weren't arriving or whether they've just arrived. But Mick Norton is here all the way from Wakefield. Dan Cullen's here. Top of the morning to all you plant porn addicts, quite right. And Ken Hatcher. Mammut, they moved the space shuttle. They did. Yeah, if ever you get a chance, go over to the Mammut YouTube channel. Some of the things they get involved in are just astonishing. Not all appropriate for here, as you know, as Ken has rightly said. They've moved things like the space shuttle, an astonishing company, remarkable engineering. I mean, how much does 130 meters of bridge actually weigh? Many hundreds of tons, I would imagine, and to actually guide it to place like that with that precision, 5 millimeter precision, unbelievable stuff. I wonder, will it make a difference to the rail? I have no idea. But Chris Ford has just arrived as well. Chris over on Facebook this morning. Are you always there, Chris, or am I imagining things? Glad to have you here either way. Still loads to get through. Oh, yes, we're talking potholes in just a moment. And guess who we're talking about it with?
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, in addition to continuing to pioneer things like the telescopic handler and the backhoe loader, for which they're rightly famous, the fine folks at JCB have kind of taken it upon themselves to single-handedly battle the scourge that is potholes in the UK. And this is the latest video on that very thing.
They call it the UK's biggest problem, but it's not just a problem anymore. It's an epidemic. More than half of our roads are failing. They've been talking about a fix for years. You know the estimated repair cost? £14 billion. Okay, team, we've seen the size of the problem. Now let's get the job done right. Let's roll. Cut, crop, clean, with one machine.
Job's done.
JCB Pothole Pro. You're next.
Was it me, or did that look like the trailer for a new detective series, gritty and stuff? Yeah, top work there, JCB. And I'm not. I wasn't imagining things. Chris Walters just said. Just trying to confuse you. I like to be unpredictable. You normally watch over on YouTube, don't you? I think that's the case. I worked on the first moving bridge in Ireland. 8 days to pull it, 70 meters. Was moving 6 inches an hour. 150 cables pulling it. Unbelievable stuff. 141,000 house builds completed in 2025. Starmer, please note, 1.5 million in 5 years. My ass. I hadn't seen that figure, but 141,000 is about 100,000, or more than 100,000 short of our usual output, which I think, well, obviously doesn't show Mr. Starmer and his cohorts in a particularly good light, but also goes to highlight the issues that facing the house building sector at the moment. Go back 4 or 5 years, and they were basically propping up the entire construction industry, accounted for a third to a half of all construction activity, and now not so much. Chris Ford says, can't beat a yellow injection first thing in the morning. No, I think JCB should hand those out on the NHS. And Dan saying, good one, Mick. Yeah, absolutely. 141,000. As I say, I think in years gone by, we were looking at 220, 230, 250,000 maybe. 141,000. That's a long way off. Well, a long way off our usual performance as an industry, but a long way off of Keir Starmer's predictions. So, yeah, a bit of discussion to be had there. We'll be back in just a moment with the fine folks at Komatsu.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Yeah, kind of unconnected, but I've just had a message here from yesterday's coverage of the death of Derek Russell up on that demolition project up in Paisley. This comes from a guy called Dave Smith, who says, condolences to his family, friends and co-workers. And this is the bit that got me. Mourn the dead, fight for the living. Well said, Dave. Well said indeed. Kind of ties into my morning monologue today. So, yeah, we'll come back to that in just a moment. Dan, you were just a bit late. He did do the weather report, and it's rain, solid rain. I can show you if you bear with me 1 second. There you are. That was Ken Hatcher's weather report from Welsh Wales. Comes to something when we're actually expecting a weather report, doesn't it? Incidentally, what was it like where you were last night? We've had our heating on because it's been a bit chilly. Last night in our front room, it was seriously hot. All went to bed last night, and I was awoken probably 4 times by my dog panting. It was that hot in this house. I've turned the heating right the way down now, but yeah, really seriously warm. I don't know I mean, I know we were down into the minuses, and I know we were well into the pluses yesterday, but man alive, it was warm in the evening last night. Dan saying Strood was lovely. Been to Strood, and it is quite lovely. We've got Komatsu. Komatsu wheel loaders in action, doing their thing.
Since summer 2025, the brand new Komatsu WA 700-8 wheel loader has been hard at work on the European mainland. That honour goes to the German company Heinrich Hecker KG, proudly deploying it in the limestone quarry of one of their clients.
Natürlich hat uns das stolz gemacht. Ich sag mal, so eine Maschine, die ganz neu auf den Markt kommt, eine Maschine in der Größe, das ist nichts Alltägliches.
Clemens is the third generation of the Hecker family to lead the company. They operate an impressive fleet of around 120 machines, around 60% of which are Komatsu.
Wir sind spezialisiert rein auf alles, was mit Quarry oder Mining zu tun hat. Also wenn Sie einen Steinbruch haben, können wir den Rest für Sie machen, inklusive Brechen, Sieben und Reverladung.
And that's exactly what's happening here on this site. 4 Komatsu dump trucks and the brand new WA 700 transport the material from the mine to the on-site crusher, much to the satisfaction of Heinrich Hecker's operators.
Fährt sich super schön, also ist eine Top-Maschine, erleichtert einiges und ist mehr Technik drin, die das Bedienen der Maschine natürlich erleichtert.
Wolfgang has been with the company for over 40 years and has covered many operating hours. Operator comfort was indeed a key focus in the design.
Mehr Bewegungsfreiheit. Also ich kann die Hände auseinander machen, ich komme weder an die Scheibe noch an die Scheibe. Und ist das natürlich komfortabler. Besseres Klima durch die Automatik, Klimaanlage, das ist schon schön.
Comfort is one thing, but of course the machine's performance is of paramount importance.
Mehr Power auf jeden Fall, ja? Mehr Power und die Maschine bedient sich auch einfach.
Stefan, a colleague who usually drives a dump truck but occasionally gets behind the controls of the WA 700, agrees.
Erstmal der Fahrkomfort, mehr PS, mehr Hubraum, mehr Schaufelinhalt. Wie gesagt, man schafft was.
Man kann spielerisch die Schaufel füllen. Wir können in 4 Ladespielen 65 Tonnen aufladen. Und das ist genau das, was wir vorhatten, als wir diese Maschine gekauft haben. Und es hat sich zu 100% bewiesen, dass wir es richtig umgesetzt haben. Wenn ich den Namen Komatsu höre, steht das für mich für Qualität. Wir nutzen diese Maschine über einen sehr langen Zeitraum. Und da weiß ich habe einen zuverlässigen Partner über viele tausend Betriebsstunden. Und deswegen verbinde ich den Namen Komatsu immer mit 100% Qualität.
Yeah, apologies for the German, but worthwhile, I think. Dan Cullen saying it was warm last night. Chris Ford with an update says raining north of Chesterfield, but reasonably warm. Yeah, it's warm here. I mean, I'm sat here in a t-shirt and it's warm. Thank you very much indeed, Jim. Just up your audience by about 30. I'm in the sheep tent trying to keep dry. Trouble is, I can hardly hear the show. It's raining so hard. I don't think you've probably changed the IQ level of the audience either. Sorry. Yeah, fun enough, I've always assumed, when you do that, Heinrich Himmler or whatever they were called, KG. But obviously it's not KG because they're German. KG, that's what it is. And yes, he didn't look older than 45. I absolutely agree. They must blast it out of the face. Don't see a face shovel or an excavator. I'm assuming they do. Yeah, I'm assuming they do as well. We've got what else have we got? Oh, I know. Yeah, we're doing ducks in demolition, which is not something you see every day. I'll be back with that immediately after a bit of this. We're having another push on that book tomorrow because it kind of ties in with, if you were here earlier, you'll know I was talking about Jaws and stuff. It all ties into that. Anyway, yeah, we don't often see rubber ducks, wheeled excavators in demolition, but maybe you should. I think this works perfectly well. Worth it for the tune alone, I would have thought. What have we got over here in the chat? Dan said, nice work there. Yeah, absolutely nice work. And listen, it was controlled enough. No fear of punctures on that, as far as I could see. All good stuff. It's morning monologue time. So I am going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle like I always do over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe, look after yourself, your family, your friends and your colleagues. I hope to see you again very soon, but if you do have the time and the inclination, I will be back immediately after this. I've been down this road before, too many times. I know what comes next, and I know it will be slow, protracted, and painful. On Friday last week, a worker was injured on a demolition site in Scotland. On Saturday, he died from his injuries. He leaves behind a wife, 6 children, family, friends, and colleagues, all of whom must now figure out how they will go on without him. There will be tears. There'll be regrets, possibly some anger and frustration. Then there will be a funeral. And then there will likely be an agonizing wait for explanation, for closure, and for justice. The 10th anniversary of the Didcot disaster, in which 4 demolition workers lost their lives, will soon be upon us. 10 years, an entire decade, with no answers yet forthcoming. The site upon which Derek Russell was killed last week was far less complex than the fossil fuel power station at Didcot. But a lack of complexity doesn't mean that the findings will arrive anytime soon. The underfunded and understaffed health and safety executive generally turns around its findings on a fatal site accident in 4 to 5 years. Assuming that's the case, Derek Russell's family will not be granted any real closure before 2030 or beyond. 6 children left without a father, and the best we can hope is that the HSE delivers its findings before they reach adulthood. And that, of course, should be the primary concern, that the family of Derek Russell receives the support they need and the closure to which they're quite rightly entitled. But beyond that, what? What happens next? How does the demolition industry respond beyond trite expressions of thoughts and prayers? If, as we continually tell ourselves, each incident, accident, near miss and fatality is a learning opportunity, are we really willing to wait 4, 5 or more years for that education? If the HSE can't deliver meaningful findings in a timely manner, are we willing to just let that time elapse? Are we as an industry saying there are lessons to be learned here, but we're willing to wait? Are we willing to potentially expose workers to the same hazard that killed Derek Russell until the HSE finally delivers its findings? Are we willing to accept that yet another site fatality is just another number in the industry's league table of death? So what's the alternative? Well, if the health and safety executive is unable to carry out accident investigations in a timely manner, then maybe we should. Maybe the industry should. We have in our midst highly trained and respected demolition consultants and experts who regularly advise on the safest methods of demolition and deconstruction. Why not engage their skills to carry out our own independent investigations to ascertain the true cause of a demolition accident or fatality? I'm not talking about making them judge, jury, and executioner. I'm talking about using them effectively as forensic experts, purely to ascertain the likely cause of a death. No appointing of blame, just the cold, hard facts of what happened and why. Obviously, that notion of independent accident inquiries is not without its challenges. There's a concern that the findings of such an inquiry might prejudice an ongoing investigation and possible prosecution. And it's a fair point. What's the alternative? Do we all just go along as before, placing more men and women in harm's way just to safeguard the validity of a protracted investigation? And what's more important here, a successful prosecution or the safety of the thousands of demolition workers on site right now? There's also a concern that the findings of an independent inquiry shared... No, sorry. Could have sworn there was a sneeze going there. There is also the concern that the findings of an independent inquiry shared with the wider industry as a safety advisory could be used by unscrupulous rivals as a stick with which to beat the company that suffered the accident. I'd love to say that wouldn't happen, but knowing the industry as I do, I fear that it might. Any independent accident report would need to be carefully presented and its circulation managed, perhaps through a respected body like the Institute of Demolition Engineers. And then, of course, there's the issue of cost. Vital as they are, independent reports would not be cheap. Then again, parts of the industry pay thousands in membership fees to a federation that does precisely nothing for them. Maybe they'd be better off investing that money more wisely in an investigation, understanding and prevention of accidents instead. Perhaps the industry could employ the services of recently retired demolition engineers to carry out these investigations. They have the time, and maybe they wouldn't have quite such big overheads as a larger organisation. There's a lot of ifs and buts and maybes here. It's not a thoroughly considered suggestion. I am, after all, just a journalist. But it's clear that the investigating authorities are in no hurry to provide answers the industry so desperately needs. The sector either needs to figure out how to investigate these accidents themselves, or we must accept that there will continue to be accidents, prosecutions a decade later, no learning, no closure, or justice in the space between. There you are. Hold that thought. I've just had a... It's okay. Nothing to worry about. I had a notification come through on my phone. I thought it was related to what I was just saying. It was not. So we'll crack on. Yes, independent investigations. I mean, I don't think there's any question. We have the skill set. You think about the Terry Quambys, the John Woodwards of this world, and the Mike Keoghs of this world. People like that would be more than capable of carrying out an investigation. Controlling that information, I think, might be a bit of a challenge, but I think if it was done purely through an organisation like the Institute of Demolition Engineers, I don't think that would be an issue. There is the concern about prejudicing court cases and stuff, but I'd like to flip that on its head. I personally believe that one of the reasons that it's taken as long as it has to investigate the Didcot disaster is because the people that are doing the investigation are not equipped to do it. I'm sure there are some very knowledgeable, some very dedicated people involved in the Didcot investigation, but they're not demolition folk. Maybe it's not just a case of an independent inquiry. Maybe the HSE should be seconding individuals from the industry. I know they act as expert witnesses and that kind of thing, but maybe they should head up the investigations. They'd know exactly where to start. They'd know exactly what they were looking for, and maybe they could come away with some more meaningful findings. Andy Thornton has just arrived. Good morning to you, Andy. How are you doing, my friend? So yes, independent accident inquiries. I realise it's a radical approach, but we've all... I say we, the industry has sat back for far too long. Going back to the day after the Didcot disaster, I was up at Didcot and I was asked, and it just one of those, I was going to say happy coincidence. It wasn't a happy coincidence that I was there. It was a happy coincidence that I happened to have this information to hand. Not long before the Didcot disaster actually happened, there'd been a report come out that said that the HSE was taking between 4 and 5 years to investigate fatal accidents in the UK. And I knew that was one of those things I'd stored in the back of my head. So when the guy from Sky TV said, how long is it going to take to investigate this? I said, well, the average is 4 to 5 years. So 2016, maybe we'll have an answer by 2020. Well, I was clearly wide of the mark. And one of my concerns with all of this is that each new year, each delayed and protracted investigation sets a precedent. So, we've had a 10-year investigation into Didcot. If, and God forbid, but if we had another accident of that nature, of that magnitude, of that complexity, we're kind of expecting a decade or more of investigation. It's shifted our perspective, I guess. And my concern is not, my concern is not with the prosecution. It's not with fines and finances being injected into the health and safety executive to help them finance themselves. I have two priorities in the event of a fatal accident: the family, the industry, in that order. So, in the case of Derek Russell on Saturday, our first thought should be, what does the industry need to do to support his wife, his children, be that through the contractor that was involved, Kasky Demolition, and through a wider demolition community. That should be our priority. But the second priority is ascertaining exactly what caused that accident to make sure that it doesn't happen elsewhere. And the only way you're going to do that in a timely manner is to investigate it quickly and thoroughly. And it also runs deeper than that. One of the concerns that I keep hearing in relation to Didcot is it's now taken so long to process the Didcot investigation that we're relying on people having a decent enough memory to remember exactly what happened 10 years ago. I don't know about you, but I can barely remember what I had for dinner last night. In the 10 years since Didcot, or almost 10 years since Didcot happened, how many witnesses have died? How many investigators have died or changed jobs? How many of the witnesses have emigrated, retired? How reliable are the findings going to be after 10 years? And also, if over the period of 10 years, you would imagine that the client on the job and all the various stakeholders will have had plenty of time to circle the wagons, prepare their defences, just in case a prosecution is forthcoming. And again, I'm not looking to prejudice that. What I'm looking to do is to get answers that the industry needs. I don't know the circumstances of Derek Russell's accident, but whether it was the misuse of a piece of equipment, a methodology that was flawed, whether there was negligence, none of that actually matters right now. But if we could send in somebody like a Terry Quarmby or a John Woodward to go and pick it apart, follow the paper trail, look at the actions, speak to the various people that were on site on the day, and to be able to come away in a week, 2 weeks, even a month and say, well, they did this, they did that, this happened, the guy died. Here is your focus point. This is what happened. And it might literally come away with, there was a fault in the building, it was unforeseen, it collapsed, there was nothing that could have been done. It may well do that. It may well serve to exonerate the demolition contractor. And there's as it stands at the moment, there's no suggestion that the demolition contractor was at fault. Only the HSE and the courts will decide that. But are we willing to wait? As I said in that spiel just now, what is more important here? A successful prosecution or safeguarding the lives of the men and women that are actually doing the job right here, right now? Go over to the chat. Let's have a look. Jim says, people have countless inquiries, but if they don't actually want to find anything or blame anyone, yeah, well, again, I didn't intend for this to be a criticism of the HSE, because I do believe I think they've got some good people working for them, but I do think they are underfunded, understaffed. And I also think that now that they are effectively self-financing, I think it's skewed their intentions. Their intentions now are to achieve a successful prosecution which will result in the levying of fines which will help finance them going forward. That isn't actually the focus. And I do wonder, this is not, I can't state this categorically, but I do wonder, would the Didcot investigation have taken 10 years if they didn't have to be, if they didn't have to dot every I, cross every T, and ensure that their bid for probably a multi-million pound fine, assuming a prosecution goes ahead, ensuring that was copper bottomed, or using the counterpoint, the independent. If the independent investigator is, here is a fatal accident that's happened, you now have 8 weeks in which to present your findings. 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 3 months. But you're not looking for an outcome. You're not looking for an actual result. You're not looking to generate fines. You're not looking to appoint blame. All you are trying to do, all you are trying to ascertain is what happened in that split second that caused someone to die on a UK demolition site. Is that really too much to ask? We unquestionably, if you spend any time at the Institute of Demolition Engineers events, we unquestionably have the skills. There are some really, really smart people working in this industry. And I wonder also, I know I've mentioned it on the show before, Terry Cornby would turn down the opportunity to be an expert witness on the Didcot investigation because he believed that Thames Valley Police and the Health and Safety Executive were not equipped to carry out an investigation of that nature. Well, I think he's been proved absolutely correct 10 years on. But I do wonder if they were engaged in a different way, not an expert witness to stand up in court and say, well, the methodology should have been this and the methodology actually was this, and that's where instead of doing that, actually advise as part of the investigation. There has been a collapse. Okay, let's look at what caused the collapse. Was it the equipment? Was it the design of the building? Was there a fault in the building? Were thorough investigations carried out in advance? All of those kind of things. They won't, says Jim, bit like the government and the grooming gangs. Yeah, well, I mean, it goes back to what he was saying before. People don't actually want to know the answers, but we do. As an industry, we do. And obviously, I'm speaking here because, the latest accident was demolition related, but I'm talking about construction here as well. When you think about the hundreds of millions, the billions that is generated in the construction industry, and yet when there's a fatal accident, we all just sit back and wait for the HSE to get its thumb out of its arse and go and do something about it. And all the while, 2.5 to 3 million people are going to work every single day on construction and demolition sites up and down the country, potentially exposing themselves to risks that are already identified, but they're locked up in red tape within an ongoing investigation. How does that make any sense? That's what they do in the States. Why can't we have they have independent people investigate these accidents? My point entirely. Why can't we? Why can't we? We all say, and I'm equally guilty of this. Every single time there's a near miss, an accident, an incident, or a fatality, tragic though they may be, they should be a learning opportunity that advances the education of the industry. The accident, the injury, or the death takes the industry back a step. But we should use the information that we gather as a result of that to move the industry forward a step. but we're not. We're not doing that. Is there going to be any... I'm not even sure. I don't even know what that word is. There we are. Consequences of this delay. No, there isn't. I said this on my my Substack live stream yesterday. You think about the way that the industry works. If there is a project coming up, you are given a deadline to submit your tender. Assuming you then win the job, you will be tied in contractually to an end date. In some instances, going back to the video we showed you earlier of that bridge replacement, Armac would have been facing very, very hefty financial implications had they kept the road or the railway or both closed longer than originally anticipated. As per usual, they beat the deadline by hours. Yeah, it wasn't even close. But there will have been financial penalties in the event of them running late. Everything about this industry is driven by time and by deadlines until something happens, at which point the health and safety executive is basically given a blank checkbook and as long as they care to take. And I realise, I need to state, Didcot is not HSE primacy, that's with the Thames Valley Police. But the Thames Valley Police have got an open checkbook, blank check, and they've got as long as they believe is necessary. As I say, their investigations, I believe, are geared towards ensuring that they achieve a successful prosecution. And that's fine. That's fine. But the actual job should be to ensure that there is no repeat. And by the time we get to the fruition of Didcot, we'll have had more than a decade in which people here in the UK and around the world have been exposed potentially to dangers that have been previously identified, but which were trapped in bureaucracy and red tape. I've said this before. I mean, I'm talking specifically here about independent reports and independent investigations. But what about interim findings? I realise that, we're probably, Thames Valley Police are probably in the process now of trying to compile a legal case, assuming that's the route they're going to go. But assuming they're doing that, you would like to think that they've already got we already know they've got thousands of pieces of evidence. Could they not share that with us as an industry? At least let us know what they are basing any potential prosecution upon, so that we as an industry can learn from that and possibly not repeat the same mistakes. We can. There's nothing stopping anyone but time and money. We all have a way nowadays of expressing our views and beliefs through social media. If I understand, the primary focus is determining whether criminal charges should be brought. The secondary focus is establishing what happened there and why. Therefore, it's about prosecution, not protection. Yeah. And I realise that life's not fair. I realise that we don't, despite the fact that the Lady Justice is shown with her balance scales, the scales of justice. I realise that. But what is more important here? A prosecution or potentially saving a life? I'm trying to think of a sensible analogy here. You're by the seaside, you're still at the ocean's edge, and somebody climbs over a barrier, clearly trespassing, and falls into the sea, and they are now in danger of drowning. Is your first thought to phone the local authority to say, I've just seen somebody trespassing? Or is your first thought to save their life, to rescue them? I know where I come down on that. I know where most of you will come down on that. When it comes to demolition and construction accidents, it feels like that's skewed. We must have our prosecution. We must have our day in court, even if that means not sharing information, potentially life-saving information, with the industry at large. That seems awfully and unpleasantly skewed to me. But hey, as I said, my morning monologue today will be on a completely different subject. But I know from past experience, I know exactly how my suggestions will likely be greeted. Oh, it's that Mark Anthony again. He's scaremongering just to raise the profile of his website. The website's the biggest in the world. I don't need to do that. I genuinely don't need to do that. You know, I don't need the tacit support or the acknowledgement of the NFDC or the NDA in the States or the EDA in Europe. I don't need any of that. It's my focus when it comes to things like this. My focus, and I genuinely used to believe that the focus of the industry was to ensure that everyone went home safely at night. And the number of times, you know, I won't bore you with the details, but you know, immediately after Didcot, there was an industry meeting. And the discussion was not about what do we do about Didcot? What do we do to help the families? What do we do to support the contractor? None of that. There was a discussion on, well, should we have a 1 minute silence or a 4 minute silence? Like that fucking matters. Who gives a shit? 4 guys are dead. Who gives a shit whether it's a minute or 4 minute silence? Do what is necessary. Do what is necessary to ensure that the families are okay and supported, and do what is necessary to ensure that the same thing doesn't happen again. Jim says it. You can't be scaremongering when you're dealing in facts. All true. Is the HSE proud to be shown up that they won't let independent people in to investigate? I don't. I mean, Andy might know more about this. I don't know what the legality of that is. I mean, I realise the health and safety executive is kind of government appointed, but what is to stop? I mean, for example, Didcot, I know, you know, they've been very public about it. Coleman and Company, whose demolition project it was, they carried out their own internal audit. And, you know, they said very publicly, very early on, probably within a year or so of the initial incident, that they had uncovered findings that would call into question some of the methodologies, accepted methodologies from within the industry. But because of this notion of prejudicing court cases and so on, here we are 9 or 8 or 9 years later, and Coleman and Company can't actually share those findings with the world. Now, you know, the cynic amongst us, and I probably consider myself one, is if they've carried out their own internal audit, are they looking to cover their backside? Possibly. But what if they're not? What if they're not? What if they have actually followed the approved methodology within the industry that has been used the world over to take down boiler houses, and they found a flaw? What if they found a flaw? And because of the protracted nature of our investigations, they're unable to share that with the wider demolition world, and as a result, other people might die in the same circumstances. That's a broken system, right? Anywho, people, I'm sure you've all got better things to be getting on with today. Oh, hang on a minute. Dan, they don't need to let anyone in. Any independent investigator can ask whatever they like. Whether they get told the truth or anything is all solely down to the people involved. Think about it more broadly. I was going to end the show just a moment ago, but I'm going to see this through. So imagine if the industry, and I'm talking specifically demolition here, but you know, you could apply it elsewhere. Imagine if there was, I'm not going to use the word task force, but it almost like a protocol. So there has been a fatal accident. It's tragic. and the family needs some support and so on. So you as the employer concentrate on that. But the moment there is a fatal accident, it's reported centrally through an organization, whatever it might be, and that then triggers a sequence of actions. First and foremost, it triggers the appointment of an independent investigator, but it also triggers an industry-backed system for supporting the mental health of those that were there on the day that potentially saw one of their best mates die in front of their very eyes. Some kind of emergency response that is standardized. We all know what happens. If there's a flood, well, you deploy that. If there's an earthquake, you deploy that. If there's a forest fire, you deploy that. If there's a fatal accident on a demolition site in the UK, you deploy that. The mental health advisor, the accident investigator, whoever it might be, whatever is required, that you deploy that. That's not hard. We could do that as an industry. Jim says if there's a gagging order, then we can all look at who enforced the order and decide why they need it silenced. Yeah. I mean, I realise it wouldn't stand up in court as such, but you would think, if somebody tried to put a gagging order on an accident investigation, it's kind of raising questions, that, isn't it? Police and HSC have repeatedly stated the investigation must be completed to criminal prosecution standards. This is what has kept it open for 10 years. However, it also has other statutory purposes. Just second. Yeah. As I say, the standards required by the judiciary in the UK, the Old Bailey, the judge, whoever, will be very, very exacting. They will need to present their arguments in such a way, they'll need a team of barristers on it, both defense and prosecution and everything else. But within that, there's probably 2 or 3 pages that says, did cop, yeah, that's why. That there. Now, whether that is failed methodology, negligence, it doesn't matter. But within that, there's 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 pages of documentation on the Didcot report. But the bit the demolition industry needs might only be a page. That happened because of that. There you go. 2 paragraphs, and Bob's your uncle. We're a safer industry. Good morning to BPH Attachments who've just joined us over on Instagram. I'm just on my way out the door, but good to see you here. Some purveyors of some damn fine attachments, and no mistake. Good morning to BPH Attachments. Not entirely sure who that is, but whoever that is behind the BPH Attachments logo, I don't. Well, good morning to you. Anyway, people, I'm going to love you and leave you with all that thought. Independent investigations, should it ever happen? I wouldn't say you heard it here first, because that's not true. I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with the idea, but hey, you never know. Maybe somebody in power may be listening and think, yeah, he is a pillock and he wears some silly hats, but maybe he's got a point on this one. Shan't hold my breath. I'll be back at 10 tomorrow for more of the same. See you then.